All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault, behind the vault door. My name is Mark Morelli. I'll be your host for today's podcast. Flying solo today. It's a Sunday morning, and I'm here at home. I've got my bowl of gluten-free rotini pasta. Yes, gluten-free. Allergies. Folks, if you haven't experienced them yet and you're anywhere near your 30s, they can just appear out of nowhere. For those of you that actually have experienced allergies before, they're no fun. Stomach cramps, a lot of itchiness. Sometimes you break out and rashes. It's crazy. A couple people in my life actually don't believe I have allergies. They think it's all in my brain. I can assure you, the struggle is real. Anyway, outside of shopping habits to address my special needs, we're going to be talking about a couple of different things today. First off, I'm just reading something now on the CCFR Facebook page. The title of the article is "After Vegas Shooting, Gun Owner Destroys His AR-15 with an Axe and Wants Them Banned." My initial reaction, one, it's a Stag Arms. Two, it looks, to be a bit of a custom build. So here's a guy that, obviously took a little bit of care to make this thing. I mean, it doesn't look like it's from the factory. So to turn around suddenly and to be, ashamed or embarrassed of owning something because somebody else, did something wrong with it. I mean, is this, what gun ownership looks like in the United States? I hope not. I would expect that this guy would represent a very, very small minority of people that are easily influenced by the media, if at all. In fact, this doesn't qualify as fake news. If there's any truth to this at all, I can tell you that as gun owners, we should not be ashamed of the things that we love. We should not make apologies because we like firearms and we like shooting guns. Over the years, I've run into a lot of people that have asked me that question, why guns? What is it about guns? I mean, if they don't look at you sideways and kind of, treat you like the postal worker that's about to go offside. I mean, if they actually have an open mind and they look at you and say, well, why guns? Tell them you enjoy it. Tell them that you find it relaxing. Tell them that you love the idea of challenging yourself. Tell them that you find things that are, interesting in terms of the historical significance. Make movie references. Tell them that, hey, have you ever seen Saving Private Ryan? Like, every hero in that movie was carrying this gun. Why would you not want to have some exposure to something like that? To be able to hold a real piece of history, and I'm spending a lot of time now, and certainly with the firearm community, and one of the subgroups of this culture that I've grown to absolutely love is the military surplus guys. And I mean, Devin, Braden, if you're out there listening, love you guys, right? Love being here at the show. Looking forward to getting together with you and getting some shooting in. I've been watching some of your stuff and I'm really enjoying it. I'm thinking that, we have a lot in common. I really love vintage firearms. I think that, there's a lot of people out there that get into new firearms and I love new firearms too. I love all guns. If it goes bang, I'm into it. There are very few guns that I've ever met that I didn't like. Ones that don't function well can, piss me off. But beyond that, if it shoots straight and it functions, fairly reliably. I mean, old guns have their quirks. They tend to be sometimes a little bit temperamental. I mean, anytime you get into something that's, a century old, it might get a little fickle on you at times and fussy, as Black Powder Dave would put it. But I can tell you right now that, hey, at 100 years old, you might be a little fussy too. So put up with it. Because the amount of history that goes along with firearms, from that age grouping is just incredible. I mean, to hold in your hand something that a person would have held, when the Titanic sank. I love using, that point time reference, to actually be able to hold something that was used during World War I, and if you can imagine the great stories, the courage demonstrated by those that participated in that very ugly, very gritty conflict, that that saw for the first time ever, machine gun fire. I mean, if you can imagine, the time before that, you got muskets, single shot, smoothbore, lead ball throwing, pumpkin flying muskets, and one at a time, and big giant volleys of fire, and then some brave soul, decided that they were going to come up with something a little bit different, a self-contained cartridge, we still use it today, to actually have a firearm that fired, multiple rounds in rapid succession, which originally was designed, not to mow down large groups of people, but to suppress, areas and to prevent people from moving so that you could get, your troops into a better position, to take, points of strategic importance. So the development of machine gun fire and its use in World War I would have been just terrifying, I'm sure, for soldiers of the day, much like the tank, to actually see this giant, rolling metal device, with machine guns on it that couldn't be stopped. Would have been horrifying. It would be like seeing a giant UFO today, landing in the city. I'm sure it would be very scary for people that had never seen one before. Before the technology existed, when this arrived on scene during World War I, I'm sure it left a very large impression on those that had never seen a tank before. And certainly the role of tanks in military strategic pursuits has changed, but ultimately, a tank is always going to be a very imposing device on the battlefield. So you've got machine guns and you've got tanks, and you've got young men that are probably scared out of their minds with loved ones at home, and fighting for a cause, and just engaging in horrible things in an effort to put an end to conflict. We've got people that are, doing things, and we're asking young men to do things to this day. And hats off to the military service members out there. If we got a number of listeners and people that follow the Canadian Gun Vault that are from our Canadian military and U.S. military. My hat goes off to you and law enforcement. There's no downplaying it. I love you guys for the things that you do, for the sacrifices you make every single day. It doesn't have to be big ones. Sometimes it's a combination of big ones and a multitude of small things you do every day. Got to take a moment to thank our men and women in law enforcement and in our militaries. You really do us proud. I've got 20 years of service underneath my belt before I decided to call it quits and pursue this thing, and I've loved it. I got to tell you, I don't regret a single moment of my service with the Hamilton Police Force, and I call it a force. I don't care what anybody says. People think that that's wrong. I still like doing that. If it leaves an unfavorable impression in people's minds, I apologize. I'm a product of the 70s. Anyway, back to World War I. To have young men, and women are participating in this effort, living their lives while engaging in activities that are clearly unnatural. There's the generation of a lot of stories, and firearms are part of that. And given the importance that firearms would have in people's lives, then, their lives would depend on it. I'm sure there's a lot of energy imparted on these inanimate objects that when you hold them, you feel something. I know I do. When I hold a Lee Enfield rifle from World War I, and I imagine putting that pudding bowl helmet on my head, which was really nothing more than a slightly thicker metal colander that was supposed to protect people's heads, and grenades going off and machine gun fire being heard for the first time, and dark trenches and some really hard fought battles in very ugly environments. When I think a young man half my age that should be in school, or walking down the street with his girlfriend, enjoying maybe an ice cream, as a luxury item back in the early 1900s. When I imagine that young man sitting in that trench and he's holding that gun, I think to myself, wow, that's adversity. That's the kind of thing that we should really respect. People's feelings being hurt on the internet, the overly sensitive populations that we seem to have to cater to with enthusiasm today, they wouldn't last 2 minutes in that kind of environment. I highly doubt even at my age I would. I can tell you that if you've got, young men, 19-year-old boys in holes, in the dark, defending themselves with what we today would call completely archaic weaponry and technology, that's real courage. And it's not the kind of thing that should be forgotten. It certainly isn't the kind of thing that we should only celebrate once a year. I love Remembrance Day. I think that it's a wonderful day, and certainly one that needs to be respected. But I think one day isn't quite enough for the sacrifices that have been made and the ones that are still being made by our militaries. They live uncomfortable lives. I wouldn't want to be on the other side of the world, on my drive to work, worrying about an ID blowing up underneath my vehicle, or a sniper fire, or, every day, sweating so much that I have to drink, a dozen bottles of water. I'm sure my dietitian would think that that's a good idea, but spending time in those kinds of environments, I can't imagine that, that's got to be fun. And yet they do it. And they do it not because they're told to do it. I can tell you that, all the military service members I've met usually feel a real sense of duty. And I think it's really important to respect that and to acknowledge that. And I certainly will do that here. You're going to hear me talk about it once in a while. I'm going to speak about the militaries because I am coming into contact with them more and more. They are part of the community. But they're intrinsically tied to the military surplus collectors because these are the men that really appreciate, men and women. I'm starting to encounter more girls that appreciate history and want to feel that strong connection to the past. I'm meeting more and more of them every day. And there's been this resurgence of interest in all things retro in general, in Canadian culture and in Western culture. In the firearm community is no different. Certainly the page is a great indication of that. Things are really picking up. The success of the page, I'd be amiss if I didn't say in large part was due to the giant interest in military and surplus firearms. And the people I'm meeting are just incredible. Spent a little time with my boy DJ. Kid's built like a truck. He has high hopes of being a police officer. I can't really discourage him from that. He's got that look in his eye. He's going to do it no matter what. And I remember I had that look once upon a time too. So I think it's fantastic. To see a young man motivated like that. But as well, he has this incredible interest in World War I and World War II vintage firearms. And he knows the stories that go with the guns. He understands the technological advancements, that were made, the evolution of the firearms, in terms of their user friendliness and the efforts that were made to kind of improve the designs over the years. And he really does, know what he's talking about, which is really something that I'm seeing more and more is people are doing the reading. They're not just getting out into the range. They're doing the reading, and they're making reference to the historical significance and where these items, were used. And the interest extends, far beyond that. This young man has traveled to Europe and walked the battlefields, to be in that same space. How incredible is it that a young guy like that, in his early 20s, would have such a passion for a thing? I certainly understand it. I get it. Some might argue I have it myself. I don't know. There's a lot of work that goes into doing what I do here, but really, ultimately, I have this passion for the firearm community, and that's kind of what's driving me here. For those of you that wonder maybe why, and I don't talk about this much, but I guess I better at some point. The real reason that I started this was because I love the firearm community. I love the people in it. I love the guns. I see a need for a clear voice in our community that can articulate what it is that we love and present it to the mainstream public so that they're not scared shitless. For 80% of the population, they may or may not have any strong feelings about guns, but if they're not educated, if they don't know anything about them, they'll tend to agree with whatever laws come down the pike and be easily swayed into believing that the government is doing something good and productive in terms of improving public safety. I think that it would only be fair to put our side out there, and that's something that really hasn't been done before. Certainly over the years, I've seen a lot of people that have, hidden their passion, hidden their pastime, their lifestyle, and that's really what it becomes for a lot of people. It's not just going to the gun store, buying some bullets, and pulling the trigger and watching some things break. It's not grabbing your shotgun and going out into the bush and trying to find a duck and bringing it home for dinner. There's just so much more to it than that. There's this subculture of people that speak a language that 80% of the general population of Canada doesn't speak. And so it's intimidating, and it's difficult to sometimes express to people that don't understand guns, that are afraid of them, what it is that we're doing. And so to present it, in a way that they find, enjoyable in photography and in videos, I really thought that that would be a fantastic start. I've always loved art, and I've always loved photography. So I picked up a camera a couple of years ago. I mean, I had done a little bit with my cell phone, some items from my own personal collection. And then, of course, I started spending a little time at the range and taking pictures of my guns at the range. And then, other people jumped on board and they saw what I was doing and seemed to appreciate it. And because I always insisted on, sharing with people what it is that I love about guns. And, to have people, respond so enthusiastically to the idea of somebody, speaking out and saying this is exactly what it is that we love about guns, and to cross barriers and go from one discipline to the next. I kind of got to know everybody, at least in my own small circles, and I mean I'm gradually branching out now into to other clubs, waiting for some invitations. Anybody that wants to perhaps host the Canadian Gun Vault at their gun club and meet some of their people there, love to have you contact me at the Canadian Gun Vault Inc. at gmail.com, and or you can contact me by way of Instagram or Facebook. I'm constantly on those forums of social media. I really love the idea of starting to move around. I've got open invitations to go all over the place in the States. Love you guys down in Galveston. Texas, I'm coming. I promise. Don't worry. It's going to happen at some point. Big Robert, we're going to have you up here. American Gunman, right? Love you. Right? You know what? Really looking forward to doing a little bit of doing with you next summer, and getting a little bit of shooting in Canadian style. With any luck, I'll be able to make the trips down to the U.S. at some point and spend a little bit of time with you guys too. You can enjoy a little Canadian hospitality, and I'm not afraid to jump a plane and head down your way either. So at some point we're going to do that. But in any event, I'm spending time at the gun show, and I'm meeting these crazy kids. I mean, they're great guys. And then I realized they can shoot. So for the people that spend a lot of time on Instagram, Hoser Gun Guy, and Canadian Warlord. We're definitely going to be getting in some shooting sometime soon. I'm really looking forward to ringing some steel with you. We're going to head over to Galt. I want you to bring your favorite military surplus rifles. Haven't done a K98 yet. Hint, hint. If you got something that you think would be a good shooter. If you've got an SVT 40, perhaps, and some home-loaded ammunition, because we do not allow the use of steel core ammo at the Galt Sportsman's Club, would love to get those two out. If you have access to them, bring them along, and we'll get a little plinking in. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for this podcast. I've got to get myself out the door. Like most days, I find myself rushing in and out quite a bit, and today is no different. So I hope you've all had a enjoyable weekend. Can't wait to talk to you again, and have yourself a great day.